Hey, this is Mike Abominator from Ruin, Vrenth, and Gasp. You are experiencing Poppitt's Corner.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a brand new episode of Poppitt's Corner. Look, always stoked to be doing these as always, and of course, I got the up and comers, as I'll call them. My buddy, Mr. Jason Kennedy of Slanderus, is joining me today. Jason, how you doing, man? I appreciate a moment of your time to do this with me, and hope you're ready to hang and have some fun, man. How you been?
Good. I'm really looking forward to it. It's been a long time, and I'm stoked. We've been keeping busy lately and just looking to talk about the album, talk about what's going on with the band and everything in between.
Love it, man. Well, so the basis of the show is I'm literally going to go through your entire musical career and just have some fun, tell some stories with you. Okay. So if you're ready, man, I'd love to get started and just talk shop with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool, man. So give me the first, kind of some of your first recollections of just hearing music for the first time, and what were the bands that did it for you?
Okay. Let's see. Like when I was like really young, probably started really paying attention to music. Maybe when I was about 10, 12, somewhere around there. And I was listening to stuff like Stone Temple Pilots, Guns N' Roses, Pearl Jam, kind of stuff like that, like alternative rock, and didn't really know much about like metal at the time yet. Really, I mean, I'd heard some Metallica here and there too, but that's kind of like where I started getting into music, right around there, and also like listening to movie soundtracks too, because I'm a big movie buff. And I like movie soundtracks. Whenever there's like a soundtrack associated with the movie, I always try to get into it. And one of the first CDs I ever bought was the Crow soundtrack from the movie The Crow. Like awesome soundtrack. And that was like one of the first albums I ever bought that I really started getting into music.
So what about classical music? I'm going to call it classical music at this point, because movie soundtracks are like almost the last bastion of what classical considered to be, it kind of is or whatever. So I'm curious, what about the layering of music did it for you more so than the simplistic kind of styles of maybe, punk music and pop punk or things of that nature that were around during the mid 90s around this point? Because you're talking The Crow, that's, 94, 95 era.
Yeah. Well, with like movie soundtracks, there's like two different types of soundtracks. You got the movie soundtrack, like original soundtrack, as they call it, where it features like popular artists of the time, like pop artists, rock artists, rap artists, whatever. And then you got original score, which is the orchestral stuff from a movie. When I first started getting into like movie soundtracks, I was listening to like the soundtracks that had rock music and pop music and stuff. And then I didn't start getting into score soundtracks until like a little bit later, like maybe like in my early 20s or so. Like right around there is when I really started paying attention to that kind of music. When I started noticing the music in the movies more as I developed as a musician, I started noticing that stuff more, and I started really getting into that kind of stuff with John Carpenter's music is a big one. Like watching his movies and listening to his music, the way he composes his themes and score music just like really stands out. You got like that kind of stuff. And then you got big names too, like Alan Silvestri with Back to the Future soundtracks are like amazing. Like that stuff just timeless. And John Williams, that kind of stuff I really started like paying attention to and just really enjoyed it. So I throw on some like movie score soundtracks once in a while, like from those guys, for like once in a while, maybe some like Hans Zimmer stuff. I really like the Interstellar soundtrack. That's pretty epic. And yeah, a little bit all that has some influence too.
I humbly agree with this because I'm a big movie soundtrack guy myself. Obviously, with me, it's always like the Jerry Goldsmith kind of, I'm
Yeah.
and in that kind of crowd. So I always liked more of his action style movies, like Logan's Run, and like anything that he did with the Rambo series, especially because that was like my bread and butter growing up was watching Rambo. So those movie soundtracks kind of encompassed that whole essence of what that movie represents to me in in like if it was only kind of listening, if that makes sense. So like visually, obviously it's stimulating, but the soundtrack encompasses what like the movie's general theme, I would say, and that's what makes a great score, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're talking, like Alan Silvestri. I believe he did like the Forrest Gump soundtrack as well. So that again, that kind of encompassed that specific movie for me too, with the feather flying down and that music playing in the back.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of people ever think about the stuff playing in the background, but it adds a lot to a movie.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Like it's like I started noticing that like later on, like that's really a big deal. That can take a movie and make like a good movie and take it from a good movie to a great movie when you hear those memorable scores and those memorable theme songs, for sure.
I love the fact that we can nerd out on and talk something else besides rock and metal, which is really cool. I'm glad there are more people that like this stuff. And with this in mind, with I'm going to keep calling it classical, but it is orchestral style music.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool that you developed more into the prog kind of sound, because again, a lot of layers in prog, just like there are with orchestral stuff. So I'm curious if that played any part into the style of music that you play, and did you want to have a lot of layers because of the underlying, maybe you didn't even recognize or notice it at this point, but your first kind of recollections of music and again the orchestral pieces and just the layers itself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that definitely played a part in it, because I've always been interested in that kind of sound. Like I love the keyboard sounds, whether it's just classical piano or some kind of synth sound, or what's it called, like a chorusy, like like a chorus voice ensemble, like what's it called, like a choir, those choir sounds and stuff like that. Like that stuff really stands out, and I like hearing that stuff. That came a lot of that came from the movie scores, and also when I started getting into more progressive music, like listening to like Rush and Dream Theater, and like that kind of stuff is what really drew me into that and really inspired me to try to develop that part of our music.
Now, when was the point when you started to discover more prog style bands after the Metallicas and the orchestral kind of pieces? When did that whole style of music come into your world?
That probably would have been like around 2007, around that time, where I was still I was kind of like, as a musician, I was still like in the beginner stage, and I was still kind of learning and trying to figure out like what I was going to do. And I tried to meet like other musicians and stuff. And at the time I met this guitarist who was into like that kind of stuff. And he actually turned me on to a lot of that stuff, like the Dream Theater and other stuff, other like metal stuff like Megadeth, and I already kind of knew about Metallica and then Judas Priest, but the Dream Theater was like the big one, where like once I heard that, like I was hooked, just with the way their songs are structured, the orchestral stuff, the heavy stuff, the melodic stuff, everything about that. That's around that time is like when I really started getting into progressive music, and then started going back and trying to discover like other progressive stuff. Like early Queensryche music is kind of progressive. Rush, of course, is pretty progressive. And with like progressive music, I feel like there's like different levels of progressive music, because you got like some like early progressive stuff, like Yes, Rush, and that kind of stuff. And then you got the later progressive stuff, like once Dream Theater came out, and then you've got this current era progressive stuff like Animals as Leaders and Periphery and like that kind of stuff. So there's like these like different levels, I guess, the way I like to think about it.
Well, the thing with the levels and whatnot is it, prog music almost got heavier, even though it was kind of heavier in like the early 70s. Again, you're talking bands like ELP and Gentle Giant and even some Jethro Tull, King Crimson. So bands of that ilk, I would say, were heavy for their time. But then when you're mentioning Queensryche, again, that's like early 80s. So, you had the new wave of British heavy metal a little bit before that. So I think that might have translate or kind of infuse itself into prog music, again making it heavier. And so Dream Theater, you incorporate essentially Yes and Metallica, and you get Dream Theater. Essentially that's what it is. So
Yeah.
I think and then nowadays you're mentioning Animals as Leaders, I would even throw in some Devin Townsend kind of stuff there. Strapping Young Lad is kind of progressive in a sense, but you also had death metal bands infusing prog in their stuff, right? Like Death and even some Pestilence. And so I just think it got heavier over time as far as encompassing more metal into prog, which is really fascinating to see that progression. But definitely, I definitely get you there with the whole prog thing, and especially with Dream Theater and whatnot. Now, what about that specific sound? What about that band inspired you? Because I'm not the Dream Theater guy, and when it comes to prog music, so I'm just curious what they did for you specifically.
I think for me, like the biggest thing was probably the guitarist John Petrucci was a big influence. Just like how like his guitar riffs and how he plays, and how like what the way he does his solos, and how the songs are structured, and like that like really turned me on to them. And the way he uses different guitars, different tunings, 7-string guitars, and now 8-string guitar, just kind of mixing it up. So like with their albums, they got songs in all different kinds of tunings, which before them I never really listen to like bands that, well, I didn't, there wasn't a lot of albums that I know of that they would have like songs in different tunings, like on one album type of thing. Because a lot of guitarists and a lot of bands, like they pick one tuning and it's like, okay, that's our tuning, and that's where we write songs in that tuning, and that's it. But with Dream Theater, it's like we got standard songs. There's an E flat song. We got songs in D and then C. We got the 7-string songs in B, and then now we got songs in A. And it's like just like all this stuff. So that was one of the big things that inspired me to start experimenting with other tunings and having multiple guitars in different tunings. And so I really like that aspect of their music and their songwriting.
Now let's branch off of a different point. I kind of want to ask, what was your first instrument, and kind of when did you start to pick up an instrument?
My first instrument was guitar, and I picked it up in 2001. Just about 2001. My dad actually got me a guitar and an amp for Christmas. Christmas 2000. Yeah, Christmas 2000. And I had no aspirations of being a musician. I never thought about being a musician, never thought about playing music or anything like that. I never thought of myself musically inclined. I never thought of it. But, my dad's like, oh, I'm going to get you a guitar and an amp for Christmas. I'm like, okay, cool. And then that's when I got my first guitar and amp. And that's when I started getting guitar lessons. Early on, I had like a couple of guitar teachers. And when I first started playing guitar and learning guitar, I was, learning the basics and stuff. But a lot of what the guitar teachers were showing me, I was just kind of like, Okay. You know, it was like just, I don't know. I kind of thought it was kind of boring, just like basic stuff, basic chords, and we got the guitar teacher is sitting there with like an acoustic guitar, and I'm sitting across from him holding like a Randy Rhoads Jackson. I'm just like ready to rock, and they're just like showing me stuff on acoustic guitar. I'm just like, okay. And after a while, like once I kind of got the basics down, just like fingering and moving around the fretboard, I started just learning guitar on my own and just started practicing on my own and kind of took it from there. Just because like the stuff they were showing me like on acoustic, I wasn't really that into at the time. And trying to learn sheet music, uh, I couldn't get into that at all. Like I tried and I was just like trying to learn that stuff, and I got kind of distracted and I just wasn't into it. But
Now, what did you want to learn in these lessons that you didn't like? Did you want to learn what essentially were called tabs?
yeah, like when I first started playing guitar, like I didn't think I don't think I knew about tabs yet. I didn't know about tabs until like once I went off on my own, and then I discovered tabs, and then I started reading tabs and figuring out like how that works. And I started learning some stuff like from tabs, like some songs, and teaching myself that way for a little while.
Now, did you start to develop how, even I'm going to go through all the basics, even how to hold a guitar pick is kind of essential at this
Yeah,
point,
yeah,
And so at an acoustic, it's obviously very different than how you would play on an electric guitar because it's just of different picking styles. So
yeah.
with the picking styles and then the scales and whatnot, were you kind of into scales just because of some of the musical stuff that you were hearing even before this coming into play? Were you a scales kind of guy?
Not at first, no. Like in the early days, no. I didn't really know much about scales other than the pentatonic. Like that was it. That's like all I knew, and I would like practice that. But I didn't really know. I didn't really know how to move around the fretboard too much, like back then, and I was still kind of just holding holding tight with like some power chords here and there, and like that was it. And maybe I had like a pentatonic, and that's all I did. uh, I didn't really start learning more scales until I started playing with other guitarists and them showing me what a scale is, the other things you can do with a scale, what key the scale you're playing is in. Then I started developing that a little bit later, and start picking that up. And then once I started familiarizing myself with the scales and figuring out how it works, and then I could start uh, playing around with it and moving around the fretboard and mixing things up, mixing the scales up, and finding the right notes that sound good to whatever I'm playing to.
Now, I want to go to back to your point of you started to kind of get more information and whatnot, and just learn how to utilize scales more so with playing with other people. Now, I'm curious, how immediate after picking up the guitar did you start to notice other musicians around in your specific area and jamming with them and whatnot? Were there a core group of just musicians everywhere, or was it kind of hard to find? Did you have to go outside of your area to even just jam with people?
Well, when I first started playing guitar, I was kind of a loner, and I was very isolated back then, and I didn't really have any friends or anything. So I was pretty much just by myself playing guitar for a while. And for like the first 5 or 6 years or so, I would play guitar, but I wasn't like that serious about it. I was just kind of, yeah, I pick it up and I try to do something here and there every now and then, but I wasn't like trying to get into a band or trying to start anything. I just didn't really know what I was doing. I was just kind of like, oh, I do a little bit of this and that. It wasn't until I moved out on my own and got my own place, and I was like living my own life kind of thing, where I was like on my own, where I decided like, okay, I'm going to start focusing on guitar now. I'm going to start doing something, and I want to start learning stuff and really like focusing on it. You know, because I wasn't living with my parents anymore, so I got to worry about like, hey, turn that down, or like, oh, you know, put that away or whatever. And so it was about like 5 or 6 years until I started actually looking for other musicians to play with, like looking for a band to play with, or like another guitarist to play with, stuff like that. It was like 5 or 6 years later.
Did you start to notice more bands popping up though around even from 2001 to like 2006, 2007? Did you start to notice the local market, or were you kind of going to the bigger shows around this point and then slowly but surely kind of saw what was in your own backyard?
Probably I didn't start really paying attention to like what was going on locally until around like 2006, 2007. And that's when I started looking at Craigslist ads, looking at recycler ads, and trying to see what was going on. And back then, like, I don't really remember a lot of like bands that were kind of like had their shit together, I guess you could say, that they were actually like doing something. A lot of the times when I answered like Craigslist ads, you know, I go over to somebody's house and they said like, oh, you know, we're gonna rock out, and like we got this and we're gonna do this and that. And then I get there and it's just like some dude like smoking, token up, and just like chilling, and like he's got a guitar right there. I'm like, okay. And then, you know, I'm all like, all right, what are we gonna do? And then, you know, it's just like start soloing and stuff, and I'm just sitting there like, okay. And I've had like a lot of experiences like that, and just I've like met like a cover band or like a tribute band, like try to audition for them, or like these cover bands, you know, they play like different covers for different bands and stuff, and I'd go in and try to play like some AC/DC songs or something. And but at the time, like those cover bands, like a lot of the guys were a lot older than me, so I didn't like really fit in with them, and I think like they knew that too. So I never went anywhere with that. And there was like another guitarist who I met who he wanted to start up a project, and like he had some stuff recorded and he was playing it and trying to show me his stuff, and like it was really cool, but I felt like super overwhelmed with it at the time. I was just like, whoa, like there's no way I could play this. Like this dude's like shredding. And I was just like, oh, and I like, and he's like, all right, like try to learn this song and then come back next week. I'm like, okay, cool. And then like the next week comes by and I go back and he's like, yeah, so you got that song down? I'm like, no. Like, did you play it at all? I'm like, no. He's like, oh, that's not good. I'm like, yeah. And then I just told him like, yeah, dude, I'm kind of like too overwhelmed. Like he was way too far ahead. Like that dude was like, let's learn the song and I'm gonna get a bass player and singer and blah blah blah, and we're gonna play our first show like in a month. I'm just like, whoa, dude, that's like too fast for me at the time.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I was like, that overwhelmed me. I was like scared. I was like, oh shit. Like I didn't have like a lot of confidence in my playing at the time, and you know, I was just barely learning like what I could do. And this dude's like, yeah, learn this whole song and like let's go like start a band. So I was a little like apprehensive about that at the time. But after I met after a while, like I was, you know, trying to find a band, trying to do something, and then I met this guitarist who was a really good guitarist, and he knew like a lot of music theory, and he knew a lot of like songs too. Like, you know, he'd play some Metallica, some Megadeth, some Judas Priest, like that kind of stuff. He knew some Dream Theater stuff. He kind of turned me on to Dream Theater, and playing with him, I was kind of like he was kind of like a teacher too. So we would go over a lot of stuff just one-on-one, just me and him. And, you know, he kind of like played with me like at my pace. So he was like very patient and understanding. And I was able to like learn from him at a pretty good pace and learn what he was doing. And he would show me stuff. And that's kind of how I started like building my skills.
Now, how big of an age difference are we talking about?
At the time when I was playing with that dude, let's see, he was probably like 7 or 8 years older than me.
Oh,
so,
wow. Okay.
yeah.
So he has way more experience than
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, let's see, I would have been about like 20, and that dude was probably like 28 or 29 at the time. So
wow, it's not to cut you off. It's interesting. You were 20 and you were still at a level that was still learning. Usually, most of the musicians that I talk to, they start when they're like 12 years old, 13 years old, and then by the time they're 20, they've already had that experience. So it sounds like you started a lot later, in gaining that experience. So I'm curious, when was the point when you found your clique of musicians that you just gelled well with on a musical level, on a personal level? I mean, because that's super important to any musician, is to bond with them, not only musically speaking, but on an individual level. You know? So give me that whole spiel and that time period of when you started to find your clique of musicians.
Yeah. So I guess I would say it was probably like when I started Slanderus was when I really found people that I could play with, that I felt like I was really clicking with. Once we started going over like songs I had written and we started learning them together, like at that point, like that was the first time I was writing songs and like starting a band. Because before Slanderus, you know, I was trying to find a band I could play with, trying to find, you know, something cool. And I from the bands that I saw, like I wasn't really finding what I was looking for, like what I wanted to play, like the kind of style I wanted to play, like where I was at as a player. So that's when I decided, like, oh, I'm going to try to write my own songs and try to start something. And once I started doing that, and then once I got the first lineup together, like that's when I started feeling comfortable with everybody. Like I felt like I was clicking with everybody, like with the drummer, with our bass player, and with our singer. And like everything felt like we were tight. Like I felt like we were tight. That was the first time where I felt like we're actually like getting somewhere and accomplishing something. Whereas, you know, I've been to other jam sessions with like different musicians where we get together and we're like, okay. And then we just start free jamming, and, you know, this guy's doing this guy's doing that. And we're just playing whatever. And then somebody's like, oh, they start playing this cover. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then we're like, okay, we'll see you next week. And it's like, I'm just like, seems like we didn't really do anything. We were just kind of like hanging out and just messing around. But, you know, once I started the band, I said like, okay, like we need to focus and have some kind of discipline going on, because from my previous experiences, it's like, if you don't have any discipline or focus, it's like, it's just, everything just goes everywhere, you know?
Well, again, I'm about to challenge you on some stuff here. So if you don't mind, I first of all, how does the name Slanderus get chosen for this project, and what kind of a project did you initially want to start around this time? Because we're talking 2007, 2008 at this point, correct?
Yeah. It was about like the first lineup of Slanderus came about. It was actually like 2009, really. Yeah, because I started Slanderus in 2008. That's when I came up with the name and started writing the songs. But it wasn't until around 2009 where I actually started finding people to play with.
Yeah. I see. So, okay. So around 2008, 2009. So again, in between this period and even your first recording, I mean, it had been a couple years. So yeah, you had found discipline and whatnot, but it also took you even a long time just to record a demo. So can
Yeah.
you kind of explain the reasonings for it and some of the obstacles that you were facing around this time that prevented you from doing the demo right out of the gate? Because most bands do that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's see. So before Slanderus, I was I was trying to look for other bands to play in. I auditioned for one band and I thought it went well, and they're like, yeah, it's not going to work out. I'm like, okay. And I was playing with some other dudes who wanted to start like a Pantera tribute band, and so I started learning like some Pantera songs around that time. And but while I still like had Slanderous, like it was just me, and I was just kind of like writing songs and stuff. I didn't have like anybody to play with or anything, but I was off with these other dudes, and we were like learning and trying to play Pantera songs. But we didn't have a singer. That was the only thing. We were having a hard time finding a singer, and unfortunately, that project never went anywhere because we never got a singer, and then the drummer kind of flaked out, and so once I started finding people for Slanderous and we had the first lineup, we had the first lineup and we started playing for a while. It was like 2009 to 2010. And we did start recording some stuff. We were going to record like 3 songs, and one of them we actually had like mix and mastered and everything. It was our first singer. He was actually putting the recording together and doing the mixing and everything. And he like at one point he had to leave the band. Like he moved like upstate, and so we had like 3 or 4 songs. Like he basically had them on his computer, and we like never got released or anything. It just like never happened. So,
so with the constant lineup changes, what I'm hearing is the consistent kind of lineup changes prevented you from even getting this thing off the ground in terms of recording wise.
Yeah. So we had like our first lineup change was with our first singer. He wasn't around anymore. That's like a really long story. I don't know if I don't know if I want to get into that, because that's it's kind of like a dark story. But he's just say he wasn't around anymore, and so we were looking for another singer. We found our second singer, and we started doing stuff with him, and we actually recorded a demo with him. At this time it was like 2011, and that was like our first recording. Like it was a friend of his was helping us out, and he was doing like his first recording ever. It was all like DIY, like at his house, and everything was like he was trying everything out and seeing how it works. And so that was kind of fun. And I still have that recording. I just don't have it like posted online anywhere, because I don't really want anybody to hear it, because I can go back now. It's just I don't really like the way it sounds, because after that recording happened, I started to notice like our singer at the time, like he just wasn't the right fit for us, for the kind of style of music I was doing. Like I was doing like more like heavy melodic stuff, and he wanted to do like growls and screams over everything all the time. And I was like, I mean, that's cool, but like for the songs I'm doing, like that doesn't really work all the time. And so it didn't really fit right.
Well, this was right around the time too that the whole deathcore thing was still kind of fizzling out. So I'm assuming that played some sort of part in his influence, because most singers were like that.
Yeah, he was really big on that stuff. I think he mentioned a band like Chelsea Has Grin. Like he was really big into that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But he wasn't working out, and it just wasn't right fit. So I had to let him go. And
now, when does Alan come into this picture?
He's coming soon. Like he's coming pretty soon. Yeah. So we had like our second singer. It wasn't working out. Had to let him go. Then our bass player decided to go with him, and unfortunately, And I think that was due to like the way I handled the situation back then. I didn't really handle it that well, and I should have been a little more open and straightforward with them. So that was the reason why like our bass player left at the same time. And after that, we decided like, okay, we're gonna try a female singer. So we tried a female singer, and she was with us for about a couple months. And at first, like we started going over songs that are like slower, like ballady songs. And I was like, okay, this could work. Like this is not too bad. And then we started practicing, and then we started going over the heavy stuff. And I was like, okay, you know, in the practice session, I was like, this might be all right. Okay. And, you know, it kept getting a lot of excuses like, oh, like my voice isn't feeling good today, or, oh, I got like a dry throat or this or that. You know, I was like getting a lot of excuses. And then once we did like a couple of shows, and I had the shows recorded, like I had one of our friends in the band, like you know, recorded the shows, and then I go back and watch the videos, and I'm just like, ooh, like this is not good. And like especially the last show that she did with us, I still got that video on YouTube if you're curious. Like it's still on there. I keep it up there just to kind of like cringe at once in a while, just be like, oh, how far we've come, you know. And yeah, so it's yeah, it didn't work out. So like she actually, I think she like decided to leave before we could let her go. So
Right.
I think she already knew we were going to let her go. She's like, oh, I'm going to go leave and do something else. I'm like, okay, cool. And but luckily at the time, like she brought like a bass player in that she knew, and he stuck around with us. He's like, no, I'm still going to stay in the band. I'm like, cool. So after her, then that's when Alan comes around. And we met Alan in, I think it was like late January, early February 2012.
Uh-huh.
And so when Alan came in, he had like a song prepared, like he had lyrics written and everything for his audition. The only problem is the song that he wrote lyrics to wasn't ready yet. And we hadn't played it as a band yet, because it was like one of my demos that I had online, and he had heard it and listened to it. He's like, oh, this song's dope. Like I wrote lyrics to it and everything. It's all done. I'm like, oh man, that's cool. But like, we don't know that song yet. Like we haven't played it yet. He's like, oh shit. Like, all right. So we just like kind of free jammed. And then we went over like one of the songs that we knew, and we rehearsed really well. And, you know, he was just freestyling to it. And I could tell like right away, I was like, wow, like this dude sounds like really good. Like he knows what he's doing. And like he's actually singing. And I was like, this is cool. So he ended up joining, and he started writing lyrics for the songs that we had at the time. And I think he wrote like originally, like he had like 4 songs down, and then like we had like 4 covers. Yeah, I think it was like 4 originals and 4 covers. And that's like when we did our first show with Alan, and he had we did like half covers, half originals. And watching the videos, the first videos with Alan versus the last singer is just like night and day. And
Well,
so yeah.
Right. Not to catch up, but I'm curious. It seems like Alan he's more prepared just as a musician, I would say, than the previous singers, which would probably, you know, kind of give you some much needed, like almost like you can breathe a little bit, because you don't have to worry about either writing lyrics or and you can kind of bounce ideas off of this person who's kind of into the same styles of music that you are. Now, I'm curious, at first, who was writing the lyrics, and then obviously does Alan just completely just change that whole thing, and he's kind of solely responsible for that aspect now going forward?
Yeah. So originally, before Alan, our first singer, like he worked on lyrics, and then when our second singer came in, he like wrote his own lyrics. So like the previous singer lyrics were scrapped, and then the same thing with our female singer. You know, she came in and wrote her own lyrics. And the old lyrics were scrapped because they weren't really that great to begin with. So I wasn't like super tied to them or anything. And then so when Alan came in, I was just like, yeah, dude, like do whatever you want to this. And so he came in and like that's what he did. And
now, did you notice even just him being a front man? How does his portrayal of being a front man differ from some of your previous singers? Just even being on stage and whatnot, not watching the videos, but just from a performer aspect.
yeah, that was like one of the big things with Alan that really stood out to me. Like when we first met him was like his stage presence. Like he's definitely got stage presence down, and he's got that like stage persona where like he's very comfortable with the crowd, and he can talk to the crowd and make jokes and just be loose and funny and that kind of thing, and not be like shy or embarrassed or anything like that. Versus previous singers we had, like didn't really have much stage presence. You know, you got like some singers, they might be good, but then they're just like, okay, thanks. This next song is blah blah blah, and then they start singing. Oh, like, all right, thank you, cool. So this next song is blah blah blah, and then it's like that's it. You know, there's no like interaction or anything. There's no bouncing things off the audience. No like persona. You know, that was one of the big things that Alan brought to the band was like this big persona, this big bombastic, like funny, charismatic persona that like we never had before. So like he really took that and like made it his own. So that was a big thing for us.
I love it. So obviously, walk me through your first demo experience, and what I'm talking about is the Presido reality. So in like 2013, I believe you had like a demo or EP, and just walk me through recording that for just the first time and it being released finally. Something was released in your catalog of music for the first time.
Yeah. So like once at the time, when Alan came in, we had a bass player, and then that bass player was with us for a while, but he decided he needed to leave the band. He was having a kid, but he said, I'm going to stick around as long as I can. And he did, and he was great, but he had to leave. So when we did Pseudo Reality, we didn't have a bass player. So I told the guys, I'm like, well, why don't I just play bass, and then let's get an album done. Let's get something done so we can put it out there and say like, this is us. Like you can listen to us. This is what we sound like. This is what we are. And then have that be like an advertisement for a bass player too, to, have a potential bass player listen to something and be like, oh, okay, like I like these guys, or I'm interested in auditioning for them or whatever, because before that, like we didn't really have like nothing other than, we had like our practice session recordings, because I had like this little Zoom H2 recorder that I've had for like 12, 13 years. Like I still have it, like the same one I use for like practice sessions. I got that, but it's not like professional sound quality or anything. And so once we decided like, yeah, we're going to do an album, let's do like 4 songs. We had more than 4 songs at the time, but just for we're just dipping our toes into like recording for real, and we didn't really know what to expect or anything. So it's like, yeah, let's just do 4 songs. And so we went down and we found this place called Love Juice Studios in Riverside, and we met with a guy, Dave, and he's been there for a very long time. Great guy. He's a sound engineer, and he played me some of the stuff that he had recorded, and I was listening to his stuff, and I'm like, okay, like it sounds pretty good. It seems like a cool, chill dude. Like listening to the stuff that he's done, like, okay, it sounds like he knows what he's doing. So we ended up going with him, and then we started recording our first album, and we started recording with drums. And at the time we still had our first drummer, and he didn't play to a click, and he's like, I don't play to a click. I don't want to play to a click. And for me, like I've been playing to a click for years, just with my own recordings, with my own stuff when I write stuff at home, that's like no problem. It's like whatever. But he didn't want to do it, so we ended up recording it just like we would just like play the whole song straight through, and we did that like a couple of times, and then our sound engineer Dave, like he'd go in and like kind of fix the drums, make sure everything's like in time and sounds right, And so we did that, and then we did all the guitars for those songs, and then I did bass. So I did like double duty on that album. I did like all the guitars, and then after all the guitars are done, it's like, okay, now I got to do all the bass. So I did like all the bass. So on that album, like the bass is like pretty simplistic, but that was the suggestion of Dave too, because he was like, yeah, just keep it like simplistic, like you don't got to do anything fancy or anything. I'm like, all right, like that's fine. And yeah, it turned out pretty cool. Like I think like the bass tone was kind of cool. Like on that album, it's kind of different because it's got this kind of like Steve Harris bass tone to it, I think, which I thought was kind of cool because I played a Fender jazz bass on that, and at the time, like I didn't have a bass amp, so we ended up like, I don't know how he did it, but like we plugged in the bass into like a little shitty Line 6 Spider amp, and then he had that connected to his like mixing board, and it was like a direct into that, and then somehow like that came up with a pretty decent bass tone on that.
Now even working with Alan for the first time in the studio, you had never heard him under the microscope, as I call it, right?
Yeah,
this is like everybody's first introduction to essentially the band, because no offense, you haven't had anything yet.
Yeah.
And essentially the new quote unquote new singer, even though to people everything was new. So how did you want him to be portrayed on this? Did you work with him, or did you kind of just let him free range it and just see what happens?
I think for that album, since everything was kind of new and he was still new to the band and stuff, and I had heard what we had been doing in the practice sessions and at the shows, I just kind of let him do what he wanted. I just kind of let him go and just kind of see what happens. And that's pretty much like what you hear on the album. I mean, I may have thrown a couple suggestions here and there, but I just kind of just sat back and just let him do his thing on that one.
Now you're mentioning Riverside. So I'm assuming, again, some of these clubs that you were primarily playing were, I don't know, like the Common Ground, or was it more of like, were you going into Orange County and LA area, San Diego? So around this whole time, we have this huge kind of plethora of bands, even all different styles of music. So how is the initial reaction, locally speaking, to the pseudo reality EP? And what did you guys kind of meet your ultimate goal for this specific release, being the first time that people are essentially going to hear the band?
Yeah. I think for that time, I think we accomplished our goal. Like once that album was done, I thought it came out pretty good, and everything. I thought we sounded really good, and even though there was a couple things that was a little rough, had a little rough around the edges here and there, but overall, I thought it was pretty good. Like, and it was the first time that we had recorded something that I was stoked about and I was proud of, and I was proud to show people it and present it to everybody. And I'm like, this is us, check this out, to like friends and family and stuff. Whereas with the previous like recordings we've done, I was just like, okay. I'm like, oh, you want to hear our CD? Oh, okay. I was kind of like, I wasn't really that into it. I was just kind of like, well, this is what we did, and that's how it came out. But like this album, like this was the first time where I was like, I was pretty proud of it, and I was stoked, and I was happy where we were at. And yeah, once we started playing the shows, and after the album was out, and I thought the reception was like pretty good. And at the time, like everybody who we played with and people who heard us and stuff were like into it and thought it was cool. And yeah, overall, generally like pretty positive response. And
now, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, during that, you mentioned like the places that we played around that time. Around that time, we were mostly playing around like Inland Empire. Like we played like Angels Roadhouse, Ukaipa, Angels Roadhouse, Corona. We played some places in San Bernardino, like the Music Room. We played, what's the other place in San Bernardino? Marquise Lounge, the Office Saloon, Liam's Irish Pub in Colton. They were cool. There's a place called the Venue in Grand Terrace. I don't know if we were playing there yet, though. That may have been later. That was probably later. But we didn't, at that time, we weren't really playing OC or LA yet. We did play one show. We did play at a couple of venues in the OC. Like we played this place. It was like a studio. I can't remember what it was called.
Well, there's the Riff House, which is essentially like a rehearsal studio that they turned into a venue.
Yeah.
In Fullerton, there's like the Doll Hut. I'm assuming you guys weren't playing stuff like that.
Not yet. No, we didn't play a Doll Hut yet. What was this place? I can't remember the place. Oh, it's called Mirror Image Studios. That's what
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with that place.
Yeah,
okay.
we played that place. We played this place called 601 Bar and Grill in Fullerton. That place was cool. Yeah, like places like that. That's like we were playing.
So you were avoiding hopefully pay to play around this area because it was very rampant in this community. So walk me through your next step in the Sanctuary of Life EP, and again, why not do a full length?
So after Pseudo Reality came out, we didn't have a bass player yet, but we started, we were doing auditions, and then we found this dude who came in, and we asked him like learn a song, and he said he learned a song, and he came in and we played that song and he just nailed it. Like we played a song from Pseudo and he just nailed it like on his first take, the first time playing with us. And I was just like, whoa, like this dude's good. And like that. And then he became our bass player at that time. And then he was with us for about 5 years. So he was with us on Pseudo, on Sanctuary, and Walls of Mine. So after Pseudo, like a little bit after Pseudo, that's like when he joined, and then he was with us like playing all those shows and stuff. And then a little bit after that, that's when things started like not working out with our original drummer, and we had to let him go just because what was going on in his life. I feel like we were kind of like going like this, and I had to make a really hard decision to let him go, even though I didn't want to, but it's just something I had to do, just because the way his schedule was and where he was going, it just wasn't lining up with what we were doing, what we wanted to do.
Right. You probably both wanted different things at this point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, so walk me through even just, so what, again, okay. So it seems like band lineup changes are preventing you even from recording a full length, even at this time, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I never really thought about doing a full length, not until our newest album, just because I wasn't really like confident in doing a full length yet. And just because I didn't want to like use up all our songs like on one album kind of thing, because I kind of got some songs stockpiled, and then at the time, and I didn't want to like use them all up, and I didn't feel like we really needed to at the time. So that's why like in the first album we did 4 songs, and then like once we did Sanctuary, we were a little more comfortable. We recorded before, and once we wanted to do Sanctuary, our second album, then we were a little more confident. I'm like, okay, we can do 6 songs. Let's do 6. And then we decided to do 6 on that one because we knew kind of knew what to expect. We went to Love Juice, worked with Dave again. Since he knew us, we knew him. So we decided to work with him again, and then we did that album.
It's interesting that you say you didn't want to use up all of your songs. And my question is why not? Because most of your favorite bands did that. I mean, Dream Theater, you mentioned Dream Theater, started in the mid to late 80s. They released a record in 89. So, yeah. I mean, why not be like your musical heroes and use up all your songs and then have fresh material for essentially, it's all about the record, man. Yeah. EPs just get so unnoticed. It's not even funny in today's day and age. So again, I'm trying to be too tough on you, but I just always generally curious why bands just don't like do that. They don't just do full lengths instead of just EPs.
I think at the time too, it had to do with time and money, too, because like you know, we had like, I guess you could say we had like a certain budget, and like if we wanted to do a full length, that would have just kind of went. We would have spent a lot more money, and it would have took a lot more time. Um, and everybody else in the band wasn't really comfortable with that either. Because even though like I might be comfortable doing something, I got to convince 3 other people, see if they're comfortable with that too. So it just ended up, I don't know, we kind of like moved into that slowly for one reason or another. I think because I mean, I was kind of like, part of me was like, yeah, it'd be cool to do a full length, and then part of me was like, oh, I'm comfortable doing this, and everybody else was comfortable doing that, so we just ended up doing EPs.
Sure. Well, and again, I'm not trying to be too tough. I'm just saying that
Yeah,
full-length albums, from a marketing perspective, is just highly more attractive to people than EPs. You know, for
yeah,
some, and I've only recently kind of gotten this reasoning, maybe because people don't view it as a band putting in going a step beyond and just giving it their all for a full length and
yeah,
taking a chance on it. So
yeah,
again, you can't be afraid to do that. So,
yeah.
so even going off of the Sanctuary of Life, you choose the same studio probably for comfortability reasons and whatnot. I'm curious, again, is it the same reaction that you guys got on Pseudo Reality, or is it a little bit higher, a little bit lower? So walk me through again just the overall reaction, even locally, or were you doing PR around this time?
I think around that time is when I like kind of discovered PR, because like a lot of this stuff I'm like doing myself. You know, it's like I'm like the driving force, I guess you could say. And you know, like a lot like during that time, you know, uh, nobody's like trying to find us things to do. Nobody's trying to find us like opportunities or interviews or say, hey, we should do this. Hey, should we do that? You know, like I'm the one trying to do everything, and everybody else is just kicking back and just like, okay, like what do we do next? You know, that's
Welcome to the club, dude.
yeah, yeah. That's kind of like the way it's always been for a long time. And so at the time, like I just kind of I was just like doing what I could, you know, just trying to do shows. And then if something popped up, or I noticed some like magazine or something, I'll hit them up and say, hey, we got a new EP out or something like that. You know, I just kind of did what I could. And when like before we did Sanctuary, we got our second drummer, Cam, and he joined us in like late 2014. And he was like really good, and he was definitely a step up from our first drummer. So like his playing was like a lot better. Like he did a lot more stuff on the drums, did a lot more fills, and he learned stuff like really fast. So that was like a huge plus for us before going in to do Sanctuary. And yeah, and then once we went in to do Sanctuary, I felt like everything like we did on Pseudo, we just like stepped it up for sure. And as far as like the songwriting and the production was even better, because even though like we went to the same place and worked with the same guy, like you know his work got better as well. You know, the sound quality is better, the mix is better, the production's a little more polished, it's a little more tight. And after that album was done, I think there was a pretty good response. From what I could tell and from what people told us, like they really liked it, and they really liked just the overall all the songs, I guess. Yeah.
I love it, man. So walk me through the transition, and when does Jeff come in to record obviously the Walls of the Mind EP?
Yeah. So this would have been in about around 2016. Like Sanctuary had been out for about a year or so, and our drummer at the time, one of his grandparents passed away, unfortunately. very, very nice lady. She was very supportive of the band, a huge fan of the band. And yeah, we were pretty bummed about that, but like he was super bummed. And he kind of like reevaluated his whole situation, and he was just like, I don't know if I want to play music, and I can't play music anymore. Like, I don't want to do this, and I'm just gonna like take a break, kind of thing. Like he was just having a hard time, and which was understandable. So we were just like, yeah, dude, do what you got to do, man. You know, sorry what happened, but you know, do what you got to do. And I had known Jeff when he was playing with a band called Shepherd, and we had played shows with them. And I remember playing shows with them when we were like, you know, after we did Sanctuary and stuff. And I saw that band, and they were a dope band. Like I remember like they were just really good. Like Blaze was a dope guitarist, and as a Jeff on the drums, I was like, damn, that dude's a beast. Like, and I was thinking at the time, I like he was the first guy that popped in my head. Like as soon as Cam left, I was like, I gotta hit up Jeff from Shepherd. Like I gotta see what that dude's doing. And so I hit him up, and I don't think he was doing Shepherd at the time. And I hit him up. I'm like, hey, dude, this is, I don't know if you remember us, where we played a couple shows with you guys, but we're looking for a drummer, you know, wondering if you're interested. And this would have been, yeah, this was like mid 2016. And he was just like, yeah, well, I can come jump to you guys, just see what happens, you know. And yeah, he came in, and I don't remember if he like learned a song before he came in or if he just came in. But like when he came in and we played with him, like I was like, whoa, like it was like a huge difference compared to anybody else I ever played with. Because other people I played with, you know, I could play with them fairly easily, and they were like kind of keeping up with me. Whereas like when we met Jeff, it's like I'm trying to keep up with him, and playing with him challenged my playing and made me a better player overall. And I just felt like when he joined, like we had this like power and intensity we never had before. And like that was pretty cool. And so we asked him if he wanted to join. You know, after like a few times we jammed with them, and he's just like, yeah, I guess. All right. He's like, yeah, okay. Yeah. But yeah, he was always like that, like in the band. Like he was just kind of like, yeah, okay. Yeah, it's cool, I guess.
That sums up Jeff perfectly well. Love him. Love him
Yeah.
to death. So I'm curious, again, so immediately after this, you guys essentially probably go into the studio and record Walls of the Mind. And I'm curious, was this a conscious decision just to be like, wow, we have something kind of really special. Let's kind of hone it in. And if nothing ever transpires after this, at least we have this.
Yeah. I think when he first joined, like he was actually the one who pushed for us to like, you know, start recording like right away. And we were like, yeah, we'll record. Don't worry. Like, yeah, we're going to record. But like, he was just like, when are we going to record? When are we going to record? And, you know, I'm like, yeah, so let's work on these songs. And, you know, we started working on another batch of songs, and, you know, we went with 6 songs. And I feel like with us though, like even though we did EPs and, you know, there's 6 songs, but a lot of our songs are kind of on the longer side. So it kind of pushes that EP boundary a little bit. I don't know, maybe not, depending on who you ask. But yeah, like we wanted to record right away too. So we were just like, yeah, like let's do it. And so we went in, and then we went in to do Walls of the Mind, and you know, we laid down the drums. Like he laid down the drums 2 sessions. Yeah, there you go. he laid down the drums like in 2 sessions. He was done. And then we did guitar like that went well, and then we did bass. And then once we did Walls, one thing we were conscious of was, and Jeff had mentioned this at the time, whereas, you know, Alan's a really good singer and lyricist and everything, but one thing we noticed was, and he brought this up, was like Alan's singing a lot all the time on the songs, you know, just like no breaks, no or anything like that. And I up until then, I was just, you know, I just kind of let Alan do his thing. Like, oh, he's a singer and a lyricist, like, you know, do his own thing. You know, he's got it. And up until then, I didn't really notice that until he like pointed it out. And then I brought that to Alan, and he's like, yeah, yeah, I guess you're right. I guess I do sing a shitload. Like, and even Dave like mentioned, he's like, man, like, you never shuts the fuck up. And we're just like, yeah. So we just like kind of kept that in the back of our heads, like when we were doing Walls of the Mind. And so I kind of worked with Alan closer. I started working with Alan closer on that album, kind of just overseeing like really what's going on with the vocals, like every little part. You know, we got the lyrics printed out now. We're going over every part step by step, and I'm really listening to what he's doing, and I'm thinking like, okay, does this sound right? Or like, hey, maybe try hitting this note instead of that note, or sing this like this, you know, just to make it stand out more, make it catchier. And like one part, I'll just be like, yeah, let's not do lyrics there. Let's not do vocals there. You know, you need a break right there. So we tried to like keep it more balanced with the music and the vocals, where it was like the last album, it was like, there's a lot of vocals going on, you know, even though like it wasn't necessarily bad, but it's just like lesson learned, you know, from that album.
Well, so did you have a conscious decision in terms of that for songwriting purposes, though, and letting certain parts breathe a little bit more? Because rather than being suffocated by vocals, so just as the songwriter, did that play a part in how you were posing songs more?
Yeah, I guess like the way I write songs, like I just kind of do the best I can by myself first, and then I bring it to everybody else, and then everybody else kind of puts their own spin on it. But like the overall structure stays the same. And I was a little more conscious about what was going on in the vocals, and where to put vocals and where not to put vocals, where that was something I didn't really think about too much before, like with Pseudo and Sanctuary. I just kind of just like, okay, you know, I didn't really think about it too much until that was brought to my attention. And then still, I really started looking back on that on the previous albums. And then once we got to Walls, I'm like, okay, like we need a little more, we need to like hone this in a little bit more. Cause there's like, you know, he can do like a lot of shit, and like, but we need to kind of like hone it in a little more, you know? So it's like, it balances out with what everybody else is doing. And I think we accomplished that on that album.
Absolutely. I remember doing the interview with you during this specific time and meeting you guys for the first time. And definitely, you know, from your previous material, I did notice a huge step up just in terms of songwriting, lyrically speaking, where you guys put the vocals, again, I'm going to say it again and again and again, but letting certain parts breathe a little bit more. The guitars breathe a little bit more. The drums breathe a little bit more, even the bass. So again, huge step up for sure in terms of songwriting. Now, it's been a couple years since have spoken with you, and I'm curious, when does Jeff either leave or quit, whichever one comes first, doesn't really matter, but when does he kind of leave the band and you guys are kind of almost in limbo in terms of recording purposes?
Yeah. So that would have happened about late 2018. And at the time, we'd been playing with Jeff like almost a couple years, and Walls had been out for like a year. And he had saying like, oh, we got to start working on the next album. We got to start working on the next album. And the rest of us were kind of like, oh, well, Walls is still pretty new. I mean, we don't really like got to rush to do the next one right away. I feel like I was just like, yeah, I mean, we're all right. Like, oh, yeah, of course we're going to record again, but you know, it's like, we'll get there. And then he kind of started to like disconnect from us during that time, and he started losing interest, and we could tell, even though he wasn't telling us. And he started saying things like, oh, I'm done playing shows for a while. And we're like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like at the time, like, you know, our show schedule was very light. Like it's not like we were playing shows every week. So I was pretty like taken back by that. I'm just like, what are you talking about, dude? And then he started like playing with another band, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, whatever. And but then he started playing shows with that other band, and I was kind of like, well, you said you were done playing shows, but you're playing shows with another band. I mean, like, what's that all about? And like, he, you know, he was not the most, how do I say it? When somebody's, shows up on time.
Oh, he's not the most yeah, he's very kind of his tardiness or his yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, like, he wasn't he was the kind of dude that just kind of shows up whenever. And there was a lot of stuff that I let slide because he was so great. And he was just, and he clicked really well with us. He played really well. But there was just a lot of other stuff, like, things that started happening, like you just like flake out for like 2 weeks. No.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, we show up to practice, everybody's there waiting for him, and we're just like texting him, well, dude, what's up? What's going on? Trying to call him, nothing. Just like,
and you can't jam without a drummer, dude.
Yeah, like we can't do anything. And we're just like, okay. And then 2 weeks go by and we're like, what the fuck happened? And then he like comes back, and I guess he was on vacation or something.
So he wasn't reliable, is what it sounds like.
Yeah,
his reliability was not there after he probably got disconnected from not being able to do an album with you guys. That's what it kind of sounds like to me, but I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think it may have something to do with that. He kind of mentioned to us that he was burnt out and bored, and that he felt like it was like a job he wasn't getting paid for. And unfortunately, I was just like, that sucks. I mean, if you want to get paid, then you should be in a tribute band or something, because like we ain't out here like trying to get paid. Like we're just all about like passion and like what we want to do. And it just kind of felt like, unfortunately, like it felt like he was like done with us. It's like he didn't want to be there anymore.
Sure.
Even though like he didn't come to us and say, hey, you know what, I don't think I want to be here anymore. I'm going to step away. Like, I'm going to leave. But he kind of forced me to let him go, forced me to like kick him out. Even though I didn't want to do that, I was kind of forced to do that based on his response to what he was doing. And it was unfortunate. It's not something I wanted to do, but it's like, dude, if you're not happy, you don't want to be here, then don't be here. You're just holding us back and bringing everybody down.
Sure. Well, again, always moving forward, right? That's what you got to do. So
yeah. So always trying to move forward. And unfortunately, right after we did that, our bass player, Adrian, decided to leave like the day after.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was a huge blow. I mean, losing Jeff was, that sucked. That was a big blow. But losing Adrian was a huge blow for us. So we were down 2 people at the same time, like during that time. And so, yeah, he decided that he had to leave. He had things he had to deal with in his life. And I guess he felt that he didn't have time for the band anymore. So he decided to leave. And, we were cool with that. So around that time, we were talking to our old drummer, Cam, our second drummer. He had mentioned like, yeah, I want to jam with you guys and stuff. I'm like, all right, let's jam. And we started jamming. And, he'd expressed interest in rejoining the band. And I'm like, okay, I mean, that's cool. But, we got these songs from Walls of the Mind, and it's like, you got to be able to play this stuff now. Like, because this stuff is like kind of like way higher than like way above what you were doing on the previous album, So he's like, yeah, I can do it. I'm like, all right. So, we gave him a shot. We started playing with him again. He started learning the songs. And at first, like, it looked like he was really trying. He's like really trying, really putting the effort in to learn the songs. And he was learning the songs. And for the most part. But one thing that was lacking, like with it, was his double bass ability, and like double bass has never been like his strong suit, though he's a really great drummer and he does a lot of cool stuff. But I feel like we played with him for about a year and a half, and at this point we were still looking for a bass player, though we had a buddy by the name of Brandon. He was in this band called Ironclad back in the day, and he, you know, we played shows with them, and he's a bass player, and you know, he was playing with Ironclad, and you know, he hit me up and he's like, dude, like I like to play shows with you guys, you know, I'm setting up these shows in like Riverside, like MTL and stuff. And I'm like, dude, that'd be dope, but like we don't have a bass player. And he's like, well, what if I come in and like fill in for you guys and stuff? And I'm like, yeah, if you want to do that, like, yeah, I'm down. And so he came in and he started learning songs. Like I got together with him one-on-one and showing him our songs. And like he picked them up really quick. Like once I showed him something once, he picked it up, practiced it, you know, came into practice, started playing with us, rehearsing with us. And then this was like 2019. So like all of 2019, we were like in this weird limbo. And that's like when we had Cam and when we were playing with Brandon from Ironclad. And so we were playing shows, you know, we were doing like a show here, a show there. We did OC Fair, and he was filling in for us. And he was basically like playing with us, even though like he wasn't like a full member. Like he was down to fill in for us, but like he didn't want to join. Like he didn't want to be like a full member. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. I mean, you know, I appreciate helping us out and stuff. You know, at least we get to do something. And around that time, like we weren't working on new songs, even though I had songs, you know, like I had songs written. And we weren't really working on songs with Brandon because, you know, he wasn't like a full member. He was just kind of like filling in, helping us out, and just getting to be able to play shows. So when we did started working on songs with Cam, with the new songs, which eventually ended up being on Absorbing Infinity, I felt like there was a lot lacking, and it just wasn't sounding right. And I wasn't really stoked about the songs at the time. And I was just like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, I just was unsure about it. And eventually, like we finally got a bass player in February 2020. So now we're in February 2020. We finally get a bass player. I was like, okay, cool. And then COVID happened.
Right. Everything shuts down for a few years.
Yeah. So like COVID happened like right when we got our bass player. And so I think we were still practicing for a bit, but then like once the lockdown started happening and, you know, and nobody wanted to go anywhere, then it was just like, like it went to like nothing. And then at the time we were just like mostly just playing at home. And I was just like, one of the positives around that time that I like to look back on is during that time, I was able to just like kick back and just focus on writing songs. That was one thing that was like really cool that I wasn't really able to do previously because, you know, I'd working a full-time job and stuff. And, you know, I'd still like write songs and still work on stuff, you know, when I'm not working. But, you know, at that time, it was nice to be able to work on the songs with like no distractions or nothing, not have to worry about going to work the next day, not have to worry about getting up early or anything like that. So that was like one of the positives during that time. And around that time, around that time, there was this contest going on for the new Bill and Ted movie. I don't know if you saw the new Bill and Ted movie, Face the Music. It came out like a year ago.
Yeah, it's not very good, but go on.
Yeah. So they were having this contest, like they wanted like people to do a video of them like air guitaring to like a clip, you know, a song or whatever. And so the little clip is like a 30-second clip. So I told the guys, I'm like, dude, like we should do this, you know, just like we're not doing nothing else. Like, let's just like do this. Let's make a little video for this. And let's try to do it. Like, let's actually learn the song. Like, even though it's like a 30-second clip, like everybody, you know, a lot of people are just like doing the air guitar thing. It's like, we actually learned that clip and played the song. So like, I got it up on YouTube still. And we played the little Bill and Ted clip, and we submitted it. And I think we got an email back saying like, we were in like the first stage of production, like they were going to put it in. And then I never heard back after that. But then once I saw the movie and I saw the end credits, and then all the end credits came with like everybody's like clips, I'm like, oh, here it is. And I was like watching the end credits, and then we never came up. And I'm like, oh man, that would have been so cool. But yeah, that unfortunately, like that lineup that was the only thing we ever did like with that lineup, because that was during that weird time. I think it was like April 2020 or something.
Sure.
But, yeah, but around that time. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Around that time, like our bass player at the time, he had mentioned that when we were playing with our drummer Cam, like he mentioned that like a lot of the songs like didn't really sound the same as Walls, like they're on the album. Like he felt like they were like a lot slower, and like a lot of the double bass wasn't there. And I was like, yeah, I know. It's we've been trying to get him up to speed for a while, but you know, this is like a year now, and it kind of came to a point. I'm just like, dude, like I don't think this is working out. So he decided to leave on his own, because he kind of saw it coming, and you know, it was all amicable, and he was cool with it, you know. And you know, he plays in a band now called Megalodon. We play shows with them. We're cool with those guys, and it's all good fun. And so that's like when we were going to start looking for a drummer, and yeah.
And now immediately after getting the new drummer up to speed and whatnot, walk me through again your decision to finally make a debut album after 15 plus years, or 14 years at this point.
Yeah. So basically, like what I try to do is like, you know, I want to have like a solid lineup before we do anything big like that. And that's kind of like what I've been trying to build for, like, you know, ever since Jeff and Adrian left, is trying to get back to that point where we were like a tight, solid unit that, you know, we could actually move forward. And I always kind of thought of it like, you know, it's like it's like having a Ferrari in the garage, but the Ferrari's missing one tire. You know, it's like, it's a badass car, but like you ain't gonna go anywhere without that fourth tire. You know, it's just like, it's just gonna sit there. So that's kind of like what happened for a while, and we just like really struggled with that. And so once and then now through 2020, you know, we didn't do a lot. I was just, you know, I was doing stuff on my own, you know, working on new songs, and doing that, just practicing, you know. And it wasn't until late 2020, like we were still looking for a drummer. And it was late 2020, and we finally found our current drummer, JJ. And I had found JJ on a website called Bandmix. It's like a networking site for musicians. And I ended up hitting him up, and he responded. And I noticed like this dude is like 18. I'm like, damn, this dude's young. I'm like, okay, like if you could play, that's cool. And I told him like, yeah, you know, try to learn a couple songs. And he said he was interested. And I said, yeah, if you can learn like at least 2 songs, that'd be cool. And we can at least go over those like when we meet you and stuff. And so he did. Like he actually learned 3 songs. And he's like, yeah, I got him down. I'm like, okay, we'll see. And, you know, and we went in and we played like a couple songs from Walls of Mine, and like this dude like nailed it. And I was just like, whoa, cool. Like he nailed those songs, and he came in, he was very professional, very easygoing. He knew his shit, and he was prepared, which I really liked, because we'd auditioned people before who were just like no preparation or nothing, and it was just like a disaster. And so that was really cool. And I was pretty stoked about that. And plus he's like really young. So he brought this like breath of fresh air, and yeah, it was just really cool. And so once we got JJ, now it's like December. Now we're in January 2021. We got a full lineup now. It's like we got our drummer, we got our bass player, you know, we're together, start working on some new songs. It's like, okay, cool. And then our bass player gets COVID. And so he got COVID and he was out for about like a month. And, you know, we try to keep in touch with them, you know, say, hey, how you doing, dude? What's going on? And he was just kind of like becoming more and more distant with us. Like he was responding less and less, and which I thought was weird. And then we were trying to call him because we didn't hear from him for a while. And then we just tried to call him and he wasn't answering calls or anything. And then he sent me a long text message basically saying that he's quitting and that he doesn't want to play in any bands, doesn't want to play shows or anything like that. I guess he had a really bad experience with COVID. And so that put us a step back again. So now we got to look for a bass player again.
Now, were you recording at this point, or was this just during the songwriting stage?
Still during the songwriting stage, yeah. Yeah, we at that time we hadn't started working on new songs with JJ yet. We were still working on some older songs because, you know, he didn't know a lot of the older songs. So we were still working on some older songs. And then when that bass player quit, I just told the guys, I'm like, all right, like, I think what we should do is like, let's just focus on new songs right now. We got to focus on something. And let's just, you know, we'll shoot towards the end of the year, like, you know, towards like August or September or whatever. Like, let's do an album, but like, if we have to, I'll just play bass. Like, we'll keep working on the new stuff and keep pressing forward. But we'll just see what happens. Like, if we get a bass player, cool, we'll get him up to speed. We'll start, and then we'll get him on the new songs, and then we'll record. Or if we don't have a bass player by then, we're still going to record. Like, let's just do something.
Okay.
And, yeah. So I was just trying to, like, you know, trying to be positive and try to look forward. And
sure. So when do you guys actually go into the studio?
We didn't go into the studio until, let's see, March. I think it was like late February. I have to go back and like look at my calendar, but I believe it was like late February is like when we actually started like finally recording. Let's see.
So
yeah, it's like late February.
Okay, so after this, I'm curious when it comes to picking the songs. Again, I'm going to use your lingo. Did you use every song that you wanted to that you had written, or were there songs kind of left over that you didn't want to use? Didn't want to use all of your songs or whatever?
Well, this time around, so when we started working on new songs, I had quite a few songs. But I was still working, like developing new songs at the same time. And then we were auditioning some people, and then we had a couple auditions in 1 week, which is like super rare for us. That like never happens. And we had a couple guys come in. The first guy came in, really nice guy, really cool. And then we had a second guy come in, and he came in, he learned like 4 songs. And he came in and like nailed those 4 songs. And he's just like a really good bass player, like really talented. And that ended up being Brian, who's our current bass player now. And he came in August 2021. And he came in, we started jamming with him. He meshed with us really well. And he was he was the kind of bass player we were looking for, somebody who can like really stand out and kind of do his own thing, because that's sort of like what our previous bass player Adrian did, and he had some big shoes to fill. Like that was really hard trying to find somebody who can like fill those shoes, because he was really good, and it was hard to find somebody to like that could match that or be better than that.
Sure. Now, Now I want to change subjects real quick.
Mhm.
I want to get to the album cover. Okay, so I want to get to like the whole concept to absorbing infinity, and obviously you have the infinity sign on the album cover. What is the overall concept, and who actually did this album cover? Because I'm having a hard time even just finding that the basic information for the album cover artist.
Okay. So the album title actually came from Alan. He came up with that title when he was working on the lyrics for the new songs, and one of the songs, like he said, I think I'm gonna call it "Absorbing Infinity," and like when he told us that, I was just like, oh, okay, like that's pretty cool. Like I don't know, that title really stood out to me, and I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Okay, and so that was one where I just kept it in the back of my head. I'm like, man, this album's probably going to be called Absorbing Infinity. I think like that's such a cool title. And as we were working on the songs, like, you know, Alan was working on lyrics a little bit before we went into the studio, and then like when we started recording, like he started working on the songs a lot more. Like he likes to work on the lyrics like sort of last minute. So like he was working on this stuff like a month before we went in recording, and while we were recording he was working on this stuff. So that title came about from one of the songs, because one of the songs is called Absorbing Infinity. And I just went through like, you know, all the lyrics like as we were recording the album, and for like potential titles and stuff. And I just thought like that really stood out, and I thought it was cool. So like I told everybody like, I think this should be the title, the album title, and they're like, yeah, that's cool. Like that's cool. So that's how that came about.
Now,
And, yep.
yeah. So walk me through just who did the album cover.
Okay, so the album cover, it was actually this dude I found on Instagram, and this dude, I think his name is Raul, and his Instagram handle is like Ico_sphere, something like that. I tried
Okay.
to look it up here. Yeah, it's Ico_sphere, and that's the dude that did the album cover.
Sure. Now, why not? Again, I had a hard time even finding that information. So why not include that even on the Bandcamp per se?
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I could do that. I don't know. I guess I thought I did that, but yeah, I'll go back and put that on there. Because I know I did put it on like the original like Instagram post and Facebook post about like the whole album and stuff. But yeah, I should probably put that on the Bandcamp everywhere too.
Well, sure, but and obviously you do it after the interview went up, but
Yeah.
not everybody is on those two platforms. So just
Right.
realize that, right?
Yeah.
Now, did you guys actually do PR for this specific release?
Yeah. This time for this album, I really wanted to like step it up, like kind of step up my promo game and PR game. And so I hit up like a PR company who does like PR for like metal bands and stuff. And we started like a PR campaign for this, and they started like putting out our album to like different blogs and stuff like all throughout the internet, like blogs overseas, different countries and stuff. And I wanted to put like more money into like marketing and PR for this, because that's one lesson I learned from previous times. Like I didn't really do that, and I thought like this time I really want to kind of push that and really put a lot more into the marketing and PR, and try to get it out there.
What have you found differently with hiring a PR company versus doing everything on your own?
I think with the PR companies, they have they have a lot more resources and they have more connections, so they're able to kind of cut through the clutter a lot easier than like an individual. Like if I was to do it, even though like I'm doing a lot of stuff myself too, like I'm like trying to help them out, like doing stuff too to supplement what they're doing. And but I think that they definitely help in trying to get the word out there, get some exposure out there. And
Now,
I'm
did it take a lot off of your plate, and just in terms of having to, because you still have to hustle. It is what it is. It's like being signed to a label. You still got to put in the work. But
yeah.
what energy did you put into different aspects of work per se? Because obviously you let the PR company, find who's still doing this, who's still in business doing, interviews, reviews, and whatnot. But what did you focus more on in terms of not having to do that?
Well, I think really it's like I'm still kind of doing that stuff, even though we got like, because we only got like one PR company that we signed up with that's doing some stuff. But I'm like trying to supplement that. So I'm still like hustling, trying to find some new outlets that we can, put this stuff out on. And, uh, and so, I'm doing like Google searches, blogs, magazines, just trying to put it out there. I'm still doing all that stuff, even though we have a PR company out there doing some stuff too. And I'm looking at trying to find other PR companies that we can hit up, like maybe after this run is done, to kind of kickstart that again and do some more stuff. Just looking for different outlets and different things that we can put our stamp on. And just trying to get it out there.
Now, I want to go musically speaking to the absolute. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget it. I'm blanking so hard right now. With Absorbing Infinity record, and I want to get to one specific song. It's essentially, and again, you got to excuse my my language here, but it's Espiritu, which is spirit, and I guess in Spanish. That was like the song that hit me the hardest. I really loved this specific song in question, and I just got to ask, in terms of this song, there's a lot of cleans on this album. I'm just gonna throw it out there. A lot of clean guitars, and it's a lot of clean guitars in a row. But for some reason, this one worked just exponentially well, and I don't know why that was. And it was just over the overall. Again, Alan was letting certain guitar parts breathe a little bit more. The drums were letting certain aspects breathe a little bit more, and even the guitar tone for this particular song, I think it was a lot of chorusy kind of things. Being it melodic and whatnot. Walk me through this specific song and you writing this one.
Okay. So this one, I actually wrote this one like years ago. It was actually written funny, like it was actually written like during the Walls of the Mind era. And I wrote this song because at that time, I recently bought an 8-string guitar, and I never really dabbled in 8-string guitar before. So I basically I got my first 8-string guitar, and then when I was recording, I was like, I got to do something kind of different with this. And so I went with the 6/8 tempo for most of the song. So like most of the song is in 6/8, and in doing that, combined with the 8-string and the 6/8 tempo, I was able to do some stuff that I just like would have never done before. Just like weird stuff, different kinds of riffs, and I'm playing in like tempos I never played before, because I never really dabbled in other tempos before until that. And so I was definitely influenced by Meshuggah, obviously, with the 8-string, but like also like Deftones and the way they utilize the way Steve Carpenter utilizes 8-string. And I wanted to do something that was like heavy, but it was like catchy too, because I wanted to take that like Meshuggah heaviness and like kind of pump some catchy melodicness into it. And that's kind of like what I was trying to go for with that one. And so I did like the demo for that. And funny thing is, like when we were working on that song as a band, it's funny because like that song was actually the least rehearsed song before we went in to record. Like we rehearsed it a little bit, but like it wasn't that well rehearsed compared to some of the other songs where we played them like a lot. That was like the one we got to last before we went in to record. And like I remember Alan mentioning, he's like, yeah, I think I'm just gonna do like growls this whole song. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. It's like I gotta like do the Meshuggah thing on this. It's just gonna be, I'm gonna do so much growls, dude. I'm just like, all right, cool. And then like I had mentioned, I'm like, I was listening to like Deftones and stuff, and I told him like, well, you could do the growls too, but like, what if you went and like did more of like a Deftonesy kind of vibe? And he's like, oh yeah, maybe, I don't know. And then so like when he actually started working on the song and writing the lyrics and stuff, and then he came back and he's like, yeah, dude, this is gonna be like super Deftonesy. Like like that was kind of like where he drew his like influence, I guess, for his vocal approach with that. And so he ended up doing that. And then like a lot of the songs, when we went to record these, like we never played them live, and we'd only rehearse them instrumentally. So like we never rehearsed them with Alan. Like the first time we ever heard these songs with Alan was in the studio. Like he straight up like wrote this shit and then like went in the studio, was like, all right, here's what I got, here's what I'm gonna do, and like we sung it. And then like, we went through the song, and like, we did little tweaks here and there, like, try a little bit of this, less of that, little tweaks here and there. But the majority of stuff like he already had there. And like some stuff we had to like shorten a little bit because Alan likes to write a lot, and he always has like a lot of lyrics. So there's like some stuff we got to cut out or like shorten, because then he's just like trying to fit too much into like one space, is like, blah, 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 like, so yeah, that one, it ended up coming out really cool. Like when he came out with the concept and we started doing the vocals and stuff, and he like, then the chorus hit, I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, that sounds really cool. Like where he went with it. And I was pretty stoked about that. So I thought like, yeah.
And the overall tone with this record, I'm not going to lie to you. I got a real like Disturbed feeling. Alan sounds a lot like David from Disturbed to me. And so I got a lot more of that influence than I did Meshuggah, just being completely honest with you. And I'm one of those guys that I love Disturbed and bands like Godsmack and whatnot. So I really dug this. It's very melodic, a lot of major scales. So if people are most metal guys are more minor, more just like dissonant chords. This is kind of, I wouldn't say happy, but because you guys are using a lot more major scales, it sounds a little happy. But I love that overall vibe too when it comes to music. And this album is, if you're, like I said, if you're into the more hard rock meets prog, I mean, that's essentially how I could sum up Absorbing Infinity. If you absorb those two genres. So I think it's a killer record. I think people should definitely go check out now. Jason, I want to thank you so much for coming on and hanging with me and telling your story and helping me promote Absorbing Infinity. Where is the best place for people to support the band and this specific release?
I guess I would say to support us directly, the best place to go is our Bandcamp. So if you go on our Bandcamp, you have access to like our whole discography. There's digital downloads, or you can buy CDs if there's people that are into CDs still. We have all albums on CD, and you can find our shirts there. We got a little bit of merch. We got some shirts, we got some wristbands, some bumper stickers, and then we got some Absorbing Infinity shirts coming. They're actually going to be coming really soon. I'm hoping to get them like next week for our next show. And we got those coming because the last show we did was our album release show. And a lot of people were saying like they wanted an Absorbing Infinity shirt and we didn't have them. They're like, oh, like I like that album cover. Like, oh, do you have that shirt? And I'm like, no, sorry, not yet. And I was like, shit. But yeah, so we're definitely going to have those shirts soon. But yeah, that's probably the best place I would say, like if you want to support the band, is like the Bandcamp for sure.
I love it. Well, Jason, again, thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time here, man. Come back on anytime.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us again, or having me again, I guess. I appreciate it. It was nice talking to you again. Awesome. And then, thank you so much.
Absolutely, man. But for another episode of Poppitt's Corner, guys, we're out of here. Cheers.